What it do, bruh? Talk of the town, Nintendo, Doc Trey still holding it down, still make the best games, and you know this, bro. It's the truth. If you don't like it, you can have that seatbelt. Alright, so it is now rumored that the Nintendo Switch will be laced with 4 gigs of total system RAM. And I mean that's the current rumor. And I gotta admit, when I first heard that, I was like, no! Because I was expecting it to have about 6 gigs of RAM. And so were a lot of people, and a lot of people are freaking out over this. But before I made a video on it, I wanted to, sit back and actually look up some things and ask some questions before I gave my thoughts on it. Now, the question is, does the Nintendo Switch need to have more than 4 gigs of RAM? Well, apparently not. Okay. Now, let's get this straight. More RAM in most cases, or pretty much almost all cases, more RAM, the better. But there's other factors that go into adding more RAM that keep you from bottlenecking your freaking system. Now, the first thing to note is that, based on what I've seen, every mobile device, tablet, from any company, whether it's Apple, whether it's anyone, all of the top performing tablets, none of those have more than 4 gigs of RAM. None of them. So that's one thing to note there. Second is that you guys have seen that Epic has announced support of Unreal Engine 4 for the Nintendo Switch. Now, Epic, if you guys didn't know, was famously known for getting Microsoft to double the amount of RAM from 256 to 512 megabytes of RAM in the 360, because they showed Epic the difference to how Gears looked with 256 versus 512, and Microsoft spent $1 billion to double the RAM, right? Now, if RAM was really that big of an issue in the Nintendo Switch running these engines, running Unreal Engine 4, it seems like Epic would not be supporting it, right? Because they already said before that Unreal Engine 4 was technically capable on the Wii U, but they never offered official support for it because it was too hard to do. It was too much effort. So the fact that they are announcing pretty much how easy it is to do it, maybe the RAM isn't that big of an issue as everybody thinks it is. Okay. Another point to make is the fact that when you increase the RAM amount, you also have to increase the bus speed. Now, we talked about this before. In these Tegra chips, the highest bus speed is around 128 bits, and that's for the Parker chip. All of the other Tegras is a 64-bit bus. So if they were to have 8 gigs of RAM, or probably even 6 gigs of RAM with a 64-bit bus, probably would bottleneck the system. It would be kind of overkill. Now, I hope and think that the customized Tegra for the Nintendo Switch will have a 128-bit bus, much like the Parker chip. But even then, 4 gigs of RAM may be sufficient. Now, before you guys think I'm just damage controlling for the system, stop right there. So I was looking around the internet, and there were fairly recent articles, about a year old, just asking and testing, do you really need more than 4 gigs of RAM? And this is on the PC. These are PCs that they're testing. And they've come up with some interesting results. Some of these benchmarks between the same systems with 4 gigs of RAM and 8 gigs of RAM only amounted to a 3% difference in performance. And some other benchmarks, they saw that they tested some games that only ended up with a 1 frame per second increase going from 4 gigs of RAM to 8. So would it probably be better for the Switch to have more RAM? Yes. Is it needed? Not necessarily. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.